gosh, Bob, I don't know how far back we go. It's been a while. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it goes back to 2008 or even earlier than that. But anyways, so with this whole COVID situation, even before COVID came around, a lot of people were starting to move into small boats. So if you're already in an outrigger club, a lot of people were already in OC6, but there was this big push within the dragon boat community to start getting in small boats, because the benefit of small boats is that you can start to feel what you actually contribute to the boat. I'm sure we've all seen and know of people that we've been in group boats with that tend to just kind of go through the motions. And when those folks get into OC1s, then we really can see what they can do. And from a coach's perspective, it's great because now I can work with individual paddlers to help them adjust their mechanics so that they can feel what's actually going on in the boat and what they're putting out in terms of pressure and effort. So with the push to big boats from the dragon boat community, with COVID coming where we can't be out in sixes right now in a lot of our country, actually I think any of our country right now, small boats have gotten bigger and bigger, and the demand has gotten bigger and bigger in terms of that. So it's been a scramble to help people get boats. I get emails pretty regularly from folks looking to get where to find them, who's selling one. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of used ones available, or if they are, people may not know, is this the boat for me? Or it's the only boat there, so I'm gonna get it, whether or not it's the best fit for me or not, because it's the only one available. So what the goal of today is, when we were talking about this with our committee, we were like, okay, well, let's talk about the OC ones that are out there. What are ones from the past? What are ones that are currently kind of the big names? What are ones that are coming down the pipeline because of this big push into small boats? And we're like, well, who's been in the most boats? Like, who's got the biggest wealth of knowledge that we can think of? And it was pretty unanimous answer that we went, Bob Stewart, because every time you see him, he tends to have a different boat. And you're like, oh, well, what happened to the old one? And he'll be able to tell you exactly who he sold it to, or, oh, it's in the compound. I'm saving it for another day kind of thing. So we're grateful that he agreed to come on and chat with us and share a little bit of his experiences with boats through the years, because he's been in this game much longer than I have in terms of outrigger, and he can give a much better perspective from stuff pre-2008 when I wasn't in this game yet. So yeah, that's welcome to the conversation.
And I used to beat you at one time too.
Yeah. What's that?
I used to beat you at one time too.
You did.
Those days have gone there.
Yes, we had quite the rivalry there for a number of years. All right, Eric.
Sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Leanne. Just before I pass it over to Bob, I'm just going to give people a quick cook's tour of what to expect today. And I'm going to just give you a brief rundown of Mr. Stewart. So as you can see here, I had to cross out 27 because the gods above decreed that it's not 27, it's 30. So Bob, over his career, which is still mid-flight, has had 30 boats, as you'll see a bit later. And he paddles these boats in Vancouver, as we all know, and also on Maui. Let me just get here. There we go. And Bob, like most paddlers, comes from a dragon boat background. Most of us have started out as dragon boaters. You can see Ernie there holding a dragon boat paddle. And this would be a False Creek, as those of you in BC know. And then, like many paddlers, Bob shifted from dragon boat over to outrigger. Now, this is a rather dramatic shift because I believe, based on the location, that this would be the end of the Molokai Ho. So that's no light fare for the average outrigger paddle. That's a pretty dramatic race. But in any case, the general sort of movement that paddlers take is from a dragon boat background, at least here in North America, over to outrigger. And that's a pretty normal path or journey. And speaking of paths, here we are. Bob has decided that he's going to go into OC1s. And then this actually is a good picture because that's the Antares, which is sort of, I guess, 3/4 way through the journey of boat development that we are all on. Antares is a big volume boat, but it's later on in the evolutionary cycle of boats, and Bob will refer to that a little bit. And then here he is back in False Creek, and these are ahukais, another a journey in the boat development. And I think actually Bob probably owns both of them in this picture, but we'll leave it at that. And then this is what a lot of North Americans think Canadian paddlers do all the time. We drag our boats out across the snow, through the icebergs and igloos, and away we go paddling. But this is a rather exceptional picture. But again, here's a picture of Bob's collection of OC1s. And then here's a friendlier picture in terms of temperature. I believe this would be Maui, I think. I can't tell from, I think it looks like Maui to me. And then here we go. We'll refer to this back over the presentation, but this is a list of Bob's infamous 30 boats. So we're delighted to have Bob as part of our Town Hall series. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Stewart. Thank you, Bob, for being with us today.
I mean, I accepted your voluntelling me of my responsibility to be here today. You voluntold me. Picture that I saw of with Ernie on the dock there, that was the last dragon boat race I ever did in 2018, and I had not been carded on a team, or was not on a team. So Jan and I went down to watch the Guts and Glory race, just to be spectators, and a crew needed two people, two men. And what you see there was Ernie and I, both in our street clothes, having just come off the water, having done the Guts and Glory race. Fortunately for me, I didn't have too far to walk home to get into dry clothes, but Ernie had to go to Seattle, so that was a different story. But, yeah, the other pictures, some of them anyway. The two ahukais, I did own both of those at one time, and the two boats on the beach at Jericho in the snow. One of them is Jan's Aries, which I've included on my list, and the other is my current ahukai, which, and that picture was from this winter as well. Anyway, I've got a bit of a storyline here that might be better if I read rather than try to extemporaneous it. And so here I go. So my experience with Outrigger Canoes goes something like this. I came late to the sport in about 1991, and I had moved to Vancouver from Toronto. My kids both still live there, and that's why I asked Dawn what it was like there today, because I'm always wondering, how my kids are doing. Anyway, I started initially as a dragon boat steersman, and I believe it was back in 1991, and at that time, the festival was sponsored by Canadian Airlines, if my memory serves. And immediately following the festival, I kind of liked it, actually, even though I really wasn't paddling. I was a steersman, but I thought I would give Outrigger a try. And at that time, the Lotus Sports Club had a satellite program. They were running out of Burrard. Burrard Civic Marina used to be totally different then from the way it's laid out now. It was just one big yard, and you occupied a space for your canoe or canoes. And Lotus had actually located one there, and they ran a little summertime satellite program following the Vancouver festival, the Dragon Boat Festival. So I started with it, liked it immediately, decided I would join a club, but didn't know which one. So, and False Creek was quite a bit closer. So anyway, for whatever reason, I decided to try the Jericho Club first, and I drove down on a Saturday, and I actually joined the same day, and I've been a member since then, with the exception of our famous Gabe Somjan steersman. I think I'm the oldest remaining member of the club, so it's been I don't know, pretty close to 27 or 28 years, something like that. And it was early days then for OC1s, but there were some around at that time already. And Jericho had a canoe called the Kaiwi Challenger, which was actually designed by a famous guy. He hasn't, he's not on the list of the top racers anymore, but Walter Guild was very, very big in the early days of boat design. In fact, Walter Guild designed the Hawaiian canoe racer, Hawaiian racer, which was the design that was used in the making of the Kalmar. So, and there were some issues with that, and I don't think Walter was real happy about us copying that Hawaiian racer. But in fact, the ability to get 6-man canoes back then was very instrumental in the genesis of the outrigger racing world for the Lower Mainland here. We were able to get boats built here for a fraction of what it would have cost to import them from Hawaii. So that he kind of created our paddling beginnings with the design that was called the Hawaiian racing canoe, and the Kalmar was by some was referred to as the Canadian racer, Canadian class racer. Anyway, so he also designed the EV Challenger, and Jericho had some of those, and Falls Creek had some, at that time, they had some one-man boats. They had some Montgomerys, which was a boat designed in California by a fellow by the name of Jerry Montgomery. They were so light and small. In fact, the Ama was called the Needle Ama. It was so tiny. And along the way, somebody actually got a new Ama fitted to their Montgomery just to give it a bit more ability on bigger water. But it was really, these boats were primarily designed, I think, for flat water racing. And the Kaiwi Challenger isn't made anymore, I don't think, but the Surf Rigger is. The Surf Rigger is a New Zealand built boat, and it was designed by, his name was Chris Kelson, and he is Maui Kelson's father. And Maui still is a big time racer on the island of Kauai. And he was one of the builders, one of the Hall of Fame builders that I will kind of list, or I did list, and I'll mention a bit later. So back in the days, even though there were some one-mans available, even in the early days, the dragon boat world still, at least at Falls Creek, we time trialed on marathon canoes, where we had the time trialer would paddle in the bow, and you would try to pick the lightest, or for luck of the draw, you could get the lightest steersman and the one with the lightest touch on the steering blade. And that's how, and the time trials were all conducted in Alder Bay. And back in those days, though, shortly after that, in the OC or the outrigger world, we started using, to some degree, the surf riggers, and then eventually the sea lions, and primarily because they were able to rig on either the right or the left side. So if you were trying out for a left seat on a dragon boat team, you would have the standard rigging. But if you were a right-hand paddler, these boats were able to be rigged on the right. And I still remember the time that the famous Don Irvine had come over for a time trial, and he was a right side paddler, so he had rigged the surf rigger on the right-hand side, and in a brain cramp moment, he actually was adjusting something, and he leaned over to the left, and he hoolied the boat immediately right in front of all spectators, and he took a bit to live that one down, but that was that was the design that we had, and we still, or at least False Creek still uses those boats to this day. Although I think maybe the surf riggers might be. Certainly there's not many of them left, if any, but they still make the surf rigger in New Zealand. Anyway, so fast forward, that was in the 90s, and fast forward to this year, 2021, and OC1 racing has become a very big international sport and is raced at least on 5 continents that I'm aware of, and canoe design and manufacturing has become very sophisticated compared with those early days. And perhaps even as importantly is the availability of canoes now, and with manufacturers popping up all over the world. And there will be even a few newcomers this year that maybe Leanne's going to address a bit later if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, in our world right now, at least, there are 4, I call them the big 4 builders, and the owners and designers of these companies, albeit not the pioneers of outriggers, one-man outriggers, have been very instrumental in the exponential growth of the sport over the last 25 years. And their current OC1 and OC2 models are, I'm speaking really only to the outrigger world in this talk, but so their current models, and I say current, they are, every one of these builders has a history of many boats prior to the ones that I'm going to list. But currently the big 4 builders now include Mike Giblin, who owns the Outrigger Zone, or the O-Zone as we know it. And he designed and builds still both the Hurricane and the Tempest, and they are actually, they have a slightly different manufacturing procedure in the making of those boats. But the other ones are the Kaiwa'a is a company that is owned by Kai Bartlett, and he now markets the Aries and 2-man called the Gemini. And it's built, all of these boats incidentally are built in the O-Zone. So Mike builds boats for Kai Bartlett, the Aries and the Gemini, and he also builds Johnny Puakea's boats, Puakea Designs, and his boats that are, he's actually got 4 models on the market at the moment. The Ehukai, the Kahikai, the Kahele, and the Valari. And I'm not sure if he's going to continue to build all 4 of these models. I'm talking to a couple of the O-Zone dealers, actually. They because there are a couple of those models that are more popular than the others. You can still get them, but for inventory or for unclaimed or uncommitted boats coming into to stock, they will probably stick with the big one, the big marketing, the more marketable ones, which include the Aries and the Valari and the Kahele. And I made a mistake earlier. I said that all of these builders were O-Zone builders. They are not. There's Kamano Composites, who builds on Oahu still, and they build the Pueo X, which is an OC1, but they also build, I'm not sure if they still do build the Aukahi, but it was their first V1 model. And then they replaced that with the Kaivi, or the Kaiva, and now also have a 2-man boat called the Kikaha. And that company is owned by Luke Evslin and Keizo Gates. Luke actually is quite famous, if I'm not speaking to, or if I am speaking to people that have been around a while. Luke just about bought the farm on a Molokai race one year when he got propped badly and just about lost his life. And he didn't stop. He got through that. He continued to race and recovered quite nicely. But shortly after that, I believe he moved back to Kauai, and now he's actually a politician. He's forget what the title he is, but he's on council anyway for the island of Kauai, and but his factory remains in Oahu, up in Kalua, yeah. Kailua and Kailua. Right? I mix up Kailua and Kailua sometimes. So yeah, it's up in Kailua. So if there was an Outrigger Builders Hall of Fame, it would include all of those guys. But they are the current builders and very instrumental. But the pioneers that I would add to that list are people whose names may or may not be familiar to you, but John Martin was very early days. John Martin, Kai Bartlett worked for John Martin in the early days. Steve Blythe built the Wave Blade and the Vantage, and is now coming out with another OC1, and is also built or is building a V6, which is going to be a spec boat. And now that Karel Tresnak has retired, this boat that Steve is making on the Big Island may be the only, well, no, I guess Sonny Bradley's still making Lightnings, but it's going to be the only other boat, I guess. The Mirage is, as far as I know anyway, not going to be built going forward. But Steve Blythe built that Vantage, and it became, Kai started building them for him on Oahu and called it a Polaris to begin with. And that partnership didn't work out so well, and Kai moved his business over to Maui eventually, and started building the newer models like the Pegasus and eventually the Scorpius line. There were 4 different models of Scorpius, but I don't think any of them are being built anymore. I still own a Scorpius with the extended footwells on Maui, which I consider kind of my loaner boat. When people ask to borrow a boat when they go to Maui, I can accommodate. I do, if I can, I accommodate them, but that's the boat I lend them, because the other boat I have is an ultralight Aries there, and they're just so light and fragile that I really have to be very cautious about lending it to folks. But anyway, the other builders, Steve Martin, Steve Blythe, John Martin, Steve Blythe, Walter Guild again, Karel Tresnak, of course, everybody knows him probably, or his name from his Outrigger Connection days and his Mirage and all of the series, his Stingray and his Stingray 2 and his Fuse and Fusion and all of the others, the Zephyr, and he made a lot of big boats. He made the Osprey as well, which Ron Chin owns one. JD Davies, if everybody remembers or knows of JD, of course, runs the Gorge, the famous Gorge race now, which is pretty much a downwind race. Used to be a triangular course in Stevenson, and he's trying to get that race going again. He's permitted to do it, but he's a little bit reluctant. He's thinking about it still, because Stevenson is been spared too much of the COVID problem, and he doesn't want to be the guy that brings in hundreds of people that starts some sort of a problem there. So he's not sure about that. However, it's JD Davies that runs that race, and he used to build a boat on the mainland in California. Well, he started out in Washington, ended up building them, I believe, in California, and it was called the Viper. It was actually a Karel Tresnak design as well, and he brought the mold over, and for a little while he actually was working with Current Designs on Vancouver Island as well, who started out building or wanting to build a Viper. They had some problems with it, and I think Current Designs ended up building Stingrays for Outrigger Connection, but of course they don't do that anymore either. But and then there's a Chris and Maui Kelson. Mentioned Chris Kelson is the designer of the Surf Rigger, and his son Maui, incidentally, was a very, very close friend of Rick New, who's both coming from New Zealand, and Maui still builds the Hiko, as far as I know. Anyway, they were marketed very briefly here by Don and Rick at Hanaho before they became Ozone folks. And as far as I know, Gord Peters at False Creek is the only one that ever bought one, but I think he still owns it there. Jerry Montgomery was the designer from California for the Montgomery one-man flatwater canoe, and a few of them still exist. I think Lori Valesic still has one, and Andrea Dillon, I think, might have one. They still have them at Lotus, I think. And Tiger Taylor, of course, he made a bunch of boats. He made the Tevanui. He was the original designer of the Tevanui, and some other one-man boats. I think the Makia was one that was his. Had a bit of a short run. I don't think he makes them anymore. And then there's Jude Trzynski, who is the builder and owner of the Huki, and they still build boats in California, of course. And there are lots of shapers and builders in other parts of the world that I'm not familiar with. The Tahitians are building now, as well as the V1 that they are famous for. Of course, they're marketing. They're coming to market with an OC1 called Amana this year. That one of our folks, I believe, is bringing some in. So over the 25 years or so I've raced and owned OC1s, I've owned over 30 canoes and 20 different models. But in preparing for this town hall, I was quickly able to list at least 50 different canoe models, primarily North American built. And without knowing much about the builders in Australia and Europe or Asia, there's many, many more, I'm sure. Design criteria is constantly changing, with builders continuing to try to find some secret that will gain them an edge over the competition, which has been great because it's created a lot of selection and models, good in a way and difficult in another when you're trying to decide what boat to buy, I guess, because there are so many choices. But the differences now are trying to gain an edge over the competition in either shorter or longer water line, different nose entry, above the water freeboard, below the water volume, front to back rocker, more beam, under the cockpit, round bottom, deeper footwells to allow more angle, forward angle for the paddler, lighter weight, adjustable forward and backward steering pedals, adjustable seats, longer surfing rudders, better cockpit drainage, different AMA shapes and options for lighter or heavier AMA rigging, and even more comfortable seats for, if you guys, well, I don't know, some people still love that hurricane seat, but a lot of people thought it was uncomfortable, and it got replaced with a more comfortable foam seat eventually, and the newer ones all have this foam seat now. But as important as the changes in the shaping are the materials and the manufacturing methods that are being used now. And the changes in my time include from when it was all hand layup with fiberglass and resin, where they basically soak the carbon fiber, various different grades, I guess, with the resin, and brushed it in until it was absorbed fully, and then they would lay it up, and then this is the method that is actually still used in some cases, with fiberglass being replaced by carbon fiber, and then foam core as well in the process, and vacuum bagged, and with a two-piece shoebox style of layup, and then cured in an oven at a relatively low temperature and low pressure. And this method, again, is still used, but the new state-of-the-art method is what they do at the Ozone in China, with CAD/CAM design and a material they refer to as prepreg, which is a unidirectional carbon fiber cloth that they crisscross it in two different east-west, north-south planes, and then they foam core separate sections of it, and then they bladder it, and they so instead of sucking the materials against the hull, they actually blow the materials against the mold, and then in their case they put it in an autoclave, which is quite a big and quite an elaborate and expensive system, where they have a higher temperature and a higher pressure, and for the reason that they don't paint them. In the case of the other system, they actually, the earlier system that's still used, they with the carbon fiber resin and the oven baking, they actually they actually use a gel coat. First of all, the first step is actually a gel coat spray in the mold. And of course, the mold is all wax, so that this will come away from the mold when it gets opened up. But they can't use gel coat in the autoclaves because the gel coat will run at the temperatures they use. So they don't paint them, and then when the boat comes out of the mold, they actually sand it, and then they paint it. Except in the case of a pro boat, they don't paint the pro boats, which makes them lighter. But they do paint with an automotive paint. They will paint the standard layups. And this whole thing is quite boggling. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, I've owned a lot of boats over time, but I didn't have a real good grasp of a lot of the technology that went into the manufacturing of them. And I do have, lots of reasons why I chose boats and didn't like some and hung on to others, but I lost my train of thought there. Anyway, the newer systems allow for cleaner and more consistently flawless product, and there are very few issues now. They've actually gone through some stages of learning, I guess the learning curve, and early days they had some issues with sanding and the paint adhering and bubbling and things like that, but they've pretty much gotten past all of those problems from the early days. Over the years, I've had many reasons, or some call them excuses, for changing out my canoes, and some of them were good ones and some of them not so good. But I once sold a canoe because it was difficult to unrig in the wintertime. And I sold another one because I didn't like the color. It was actually not the color I had ordered, so I didn't like it. And what happened was I saw another, this was a Pueo, I saw one on a Pacific Paddler commercial that belonged to one of the earlier employees at Camano Composites, and it was Kelly Foster's black Pueo. The picture was taken on a beach in Hawaii, and I just needed to have that boat. So I ordered that and sold it was a powder blue color, and I didn't dig it a lot, so I actually sold that one to Calvin, I think. Anyway, some of my reasons for selling boats have been as simple as that, but I did have lots of bona fide reasons as well. And one of those really good reasons was the day that I drove into my garage with my boat on the roof, and the amazingly surreal moment that I had realizing what I had just done. And I basically stood there with the boat jammed up against the overhead garage gate and picked up my cell phone, and I was actually headed down to Seattle for a race, the first race of the winter series. And I called JD, who was the ozone rep down there, and I said, JD, you got any hurricanes? And he said, yeah, I got a green one. No, I've got an orange one and a yellow one. I said, I'll take the orange one, and I'll pick it up next race. Well, that hurricane, it was a white one, and it actually, I gifted it. Ultimately, I gave it to Ryan Pogue, who was really learning how to build canoes at the time, for the what was eventually going to be the builder for the V6s and the V1s, or the V6s for New Caledonia World Sprints, but also eventually he did the Tevanuis for the Calgary sprints. But he wanted to learn as much as he could. So, and this boat was now in two pieces. So he actually did put it together, and I paid him something for it. And I actually gifted that boat ultimately to Ricky Nu'u. And as far as I know, it's still in Comox. I'm not sure if it's still being paddled or not, but that's what happened to that one. So that was a legitimate reason for changing boats. And I also, that Antares you saw me carrying down, that was a walkway from where I stay on Maui at Kamioli 2 Beach in Kihei. That boat got trashed. I got caught on a rogue wave on Kamioli 2 Beach, and that boat ended up in about 3 pieces. I did get it fixed, and it's probably as strong or stronger now than it was then. But I did ultimately sell that one, and it's now living in Portland. It was bought by a good friend of mine, and I replaced that Antares with an Aries. That you saw in one of the pictures was the nose of my XM on Maui. I think Eric mentioned Maui, and the other one was the new Aries ultralight. But when I did a quick count of these, I was really personally, I was shocked that I had actually owned as many boats as I had, and it actually is 29 outrigger canoes, one of which was a 2-man, and there was one in that list. There was actually one surf ski as well. So I guess that would be 28 OC1s, one OC2, and the surf ski. But unless you want me to go over the list or go down the list of boats that I've owned, that's my experience to date anyway. And I'm still out there. I was out on my Ehukai this morning, and Jan was out on the Aries this morning, and we had a good paddle session to the famous Bell Can. Those of you that know Vancouver know about the Bell Can. It's our reference point for a 10K paddle, and we were on the water doing that this morning.
Thank you. I don't want to spring a really general question on you, but I think that lots of people have their experience with OC1s largely stems from club boats. That's where people start. They start with a club boat and they have no reference points. Now you have an extraordinary reference point. You have more boats than anyone I know of, certainly. And I'm known in my club as a boat accumulator. But it's nothing compared with you. So I think that if you could possibly describe how you distinguish, how do you distinguish, bearing in mind that people have just paddled maybe a Huki or a Hurricane or something, how do you distinguish between one boat and another? How do they feel different? Now, I know it's a hard question, but if you can take a stab at it.
Well, every boat, I mean, there's a lot of similarities, first of all, in designs. They all have certain, or some of them have uniqueness about them. Of course, as I mentioned, they like, and as the builders and the shapers see what's going on in the race world in terms of who's winning and on what boats and so on, they tweak their boats. And sometimes you wonder if some of these changes aren't just for marketing. Well, you know, Johnny built a new boat, so I need to build a new boat. So that they tweak something and they call it something new. But in fact, there are some, you know, rather significant differences. The cross section of the boat really, I guess, is the beam of the boat, the width of the boat, the overall length of the boat. Kai's newer designs actually have come a little bit closer. He's pinched the nose on his Aries. He's pinched the tail and the nose on his Aries for entry, and he's also rounded the hull. So there are things that are happening on some other designs. Johnny's designs have always been round hull designs. And in the early days when they had the surf riggers and the EV Challengers and the Montgomerys, they were all pretty flat bottom boats. And they were better, you know, suited for long water lines, and they were better suited for sprint racing. But so Kai has done a bunch of things with his designs in terms of rocker as well. He's added rocker, he's reduced the rocker, and of course one of the more significant changes he's made has been to his ama. He used to have what was referred to as the banana ama, and so he's, at some point in time, he actually decided that one of the big differences between the Pueo and at the time, probably one of his Scorpius models, was that the AMA made it a slower boat. So I think he conceded that fact, and he actually flattened the mold in his AMA, and what he has now is what everybody's more familiar with, I guess. But so I guess, and they all weigh about the same. I mean, the pro boats weigh somewhere between 16 and 17 pounds, in that range. The the standard layout boats aren't that much greater, but they can be as much as 20, I guess, and 18 to 21 pounds kind of thing. So weight isn't really a factor, but I talked to a guy just this morning who's getting an Aries, and he says, geez, you know, I'm going to lose some weight. Well, I actually read something that Kai wrote one time about losing weight isn't the answer, because when you consider a 3-pound difference in a weight, in the weight of a canoe, I mean, that's a significant percentage of the weight of a canoe. So yeah, if you're overweight, maybe losing weight's not a bad idea, but lighter boats are, I do tend to have an advantage, and even, you know, so if you're in good shape and good paddling shape, losing weight isn't the key, I don't think. So Jan has a criteria. This is kind of an interesting little factoid. She doesn't race the OC1, but she's very dedicated to the sport. But her criteria is that it's got to be comfortable. And we've had some boats that weren't. Some seating arrangements, some seats that weren't comfortable that needed to be adjusted. So if it's comfortable and stability, and of course stability comes with somewhat anyway with the beam of the boat, the width of the boat, and the roundness of the bottom. The rounder the bottom is, presumably anyway, the less stable it's going to be. And that fact, I think, transfers over to surf ski. I think the newer models of surf skis have what they call double or additional secondary stability. So these are factors, and of course, if one of the things in the early days of the ozone developments is that these boats came out so light. And Ron mentioned, of course, it's not an ozone boat, but Ron mentioned an issue with his AMA weight and keeping the AMA down. Well, in the early going, the AMAs were so light, people were hoolieing them. And in my own experience, my very first ozone boat, I think, was an Ehukai. And I didn't use what Ron uses. I actually used the fishing lure, or the fishing sinkers, you know, the 2-inch long is kind of the size of your baby finger with a little round, so you could hook them onto your line. I actually put them in a sleeve and actually tied them around the bottom of my rear yako and to keep my AMA down. But that particular issue was a boat design issue, and I had problems with it, and I got a new boat as a result of that and some other things. The paint in the early days, I mentioned earlier, the paint didn't adhere well because they didn't have a proper sanding process. But anyway, what I guess I'm digressing a bit. So the comfort level, you have to have a comfortable, you have to be comfortable on the boat, and you have to be stable. And there are ways of improving on that. And I suggest perhaps in the early days, in the early going of your new outrigger and getting an idea of what your balance point is, to do it in shallow water. You can raise the AMA and see how far you can go before you flip over. And if you do flip over, you're just in shallow water. So comfort is a big thing. And I think you have to look at some factors like your size, your weight, your height, your interests, what your goals are, if you're going to be a competitive paddler and at what level of competition. If you want to be the best in the 40H class, well, that's something that you can strive for. So you want a light boat and learn how to surf it probably. And that's another factor in deciding as well, is what are your local conditions? What are your primary paddling conditions? Are they primarily flat water? Or are they, big water? Are you going to do a combination of things? And the designers have, to some degree, maybe Johnny more than others, tried to come up with boats that were better, maybe not the best in one or the other, but a better boat than all the others in a combination of conditions. So, and I still contend my Ehukai goes upwind better than my Aries does. And my Ehukai goes upwind better than my Hurricane does. But I think my Aries goes downwind, depending on the size of the water. My Aries surfs better, I think. So, and I think Johnny's recognition of the dominance that the Aries was enjoying for a while, I think might have prompted his Valari introduction of the Valari into the mix, because I think his previous Kahikai was a bit too big, and I think his Kaheli had it might have been a little bit smaller than some of the guys on Oahu wanted. But he tells me now the Valari is doing real well in the local Oahu races. But the volume, the conditions, your goals, things like that. But at the end of the day, I think some people eventually have to take a good hard look in the mirror and say, you know, what's realistic for me? You know, I'm not 6'4" and I'm not 24, and my goals have to be, you know, reasonable and realistic. So, you know, but there are always going to be people that will always be looking for a way to gain a second or two and try to find the ultimate boat for them. But there are so many choices. The best thing to do, I think, is, and the ozone dealers have the luxury of being able to present a variety of models now. You have to go and try them out. I think that's the best thing to do, is to and look for the things that are going to help you. And most of these guys, like Don, I mean, who knows more about, you know, paddling than Don Irvine? And Leanne, of course, is a good rep for her and a good ambassador for the sport. She can, and is a coach, of course, too. So you have to also, that's something I hadn't mentioned, coaching. I mean, you can develop a stroke, and Leanne alluded to that earlier about becoming a better paddler is not going to happen really, I don't think, in a V6. You have to get on a one-man with coaching so that you develop a stroke technique. And there are so many different, you know, is it a high and, you know, a long and wide rotation, catch, derotation, or is it a hinge and catch and sit up, and or is it out of the hip and off the back? And I mean, there are so many things that you cannot know until you start to apply a lot of the coaching technique and find out for yourself with a stopwatch, basically, or some GPS gadget that'll allow you to see what boat is best for you.
So Bob, there's a few granular questions. There's a few whopper questions that we'll save for a little bit later. But some of the granular questions have to do with how you talk about boats. So you've mentioned beam, you've mentioned the sort of round versus flat hull, and rocker as well. I'm wondering, there were some initial questions about rocker. Can you, and maybe Leanne can chime in too, maybe describe what is meant by rocker for the audience?
Does anybody skate? Hockey players have what they refer to as rocker on their skates. So you have less of a blade that's actually on the up. It gives you more maneuverability. So rocker is how the boat bends front to back. Simple as that. And
yeah, and
rocker has been added and deleted.
What does that mean in terms of flat water versus surf?
Well, I think in flat water, you're going in a straight line primarily, and on surf, you're quartering, and the maneuverability and the you know, the pickup. It's the maneuverability, I guess, but also that's a theory that may or may not hold true when you consider what others have done. Johnny has taken rocker out of his, and he's now got. He has very, very little freeboard front and rear, and a longer water line. So he's not getting. But anyway, that's as much as I can really explain about what rocker is. It's the bending shape front to back of the canoe that at one time, I guess, was, and may still. Well, actually, Kai mentioned the other day that by the way, I've spent countless hours on the phone trying to understand better what these guys have done over the years. But I had an hour and a half talk with Mike, an hour and a half with Kai, an hour and a half with Johnny, an hour and a half with JD, And then there's a local guy here, Dan Hund, who is an amazing repair guy and builder. He also used to build boats for Kai on Maui. And well, they just, you know, they have all kinds, they have different theories on everything. Johnny is determined that the longer water line boat without any freeboard. Well, I mentioned that to Mike Giblin, and Mike says, you know, freeboard has a purpose. So you can't just take the freeboard out without doing something. So we added volume to the front of the boat so that the boat is actually lifted up on the front a little bit, so it's not going, and you don't want to purl, right? I mean, purling is something that everybody does. Some, all boats will, but with design features now, and with technique, quartering off and stuff so that you don't purl, there are things to do to avoid that. But Kai says, maybe I'm going to add the rocker back into my Antares and bring it back. So don't ask me questions that I don't have the definitive answer for, because I simply don't.
And that's the beauty, right, Bob? With all the different builders, they all have different theories on different things, which is why we get the different models. And so Dan O'Leary just showed a skate there a second ago so that you could see the actual rocker on it. Yeah.
Oh, so
nice. You can see how the ends actually go up.
Yeah.
So and you mentioned
you
a
always
term.
wanted a skate sharpener that could do a proper rocker on your skates, right?
So you mentioned the rocker. Well, with the rocker too, it's about where you place, the builder puts the rocker in the canoe as well, kind of thing, because not everybody will put it right in the middle. Some people will put it a little further back, a little further forward. Volume's kind of where you add a bigger space in there. And you talked about freeboard. For people that might not be familiar with that term, what do you mean when you say freeboard?
It's the part of the boat that's not in the water.
Yeah.
So the front, if you look at a typical boat, say you put an Aries, no, because the Aries has been, but say you take a Scorpius and you put it beside a Kahele, and you'll see that the Kahele has been shortened. He's basically chopped the boat to 18 feet roughly. And the length of the standard boat is like 19 and a half, right? So Johnny's taken like 18 inches out of the front and the back of the boat, but he's actually lengthened the water line. He's actually got more water line. So he says, I haven't done a measurement, but I'm taking him at his word that his water line is actually longer on the Kahele than it is on the Ehukai. I don't know how it compares with the Aries, but it would be longer, I'm sure. The Aries still has some freeboard or some section of the boat out of the water. Freeboard is between the gunnel and the water, really. But in terms of outrigger speak, I think what I'm referring to is the section at the front of the back that weren't doing anything. They weren't they weren't on the water or in the water. And Johnny decided that therefore wasn't needed. But I guess Mike convinced him that you just can't eliminate it, because if you don't have some volume there, you're going to purl too much. And so consequently, I think the Volare has even a bit more volume in the front. It's a little bit longer, is it not, Leanne? A little bit longer and a little bit more front volume as well, I think, freeboard.
Yeah, it's 3 inches longer than the Kahele was, but that's still basically 1 foot and 2 inches shorter than the regular boats that are usually 20 feet 8 inches for Johnny's. The Volare is 19 feet 6 inches compared to the Kahele that's 19.3.
Right. I'm not talking at all about the Pueo. I've owned a number of them. They're beautiful boats, but they're hard to get. And one of the reasons they went to the ozone to China, of course, was a couple of reasons. It was the availability of the prepreg. You couldn't. It is extremely expensive. And they actually make the prepreg right there where the boats are built in China, and of course the guys at Kamanu, they're still building with carbon fiber, but they don't have the prepreg concept because they just don't have the facilities there to do that.
They are actually Kamanu. I was talking to Alan Gotu today, the PNW rep for Kamanu, and they're bringing some new facilities online in the coming months. So they should be able to increase production. Right now, the wait time's kind of 6 or 7 months for a boat, and they're hoping to shorten that significantly with their new facilities.
Right. Do you know how you got that Osprey, Ron? I got the Osprey because Kamanu had some space in their container headed to Vancouver. They had one spot available, and I had just seen an Osprey at Outrigger Connection. I said, "Oh, geez, I haven't tried one of those. I might as well give it a go." So,
yeah, I think I remember you saying that. Yeah, that's right.
Corel made a deal with Luke about, I think Corel had just taken a shipment in and had all these foam cradles that had been in the container, and Luke was needing some for his container, which he didn't have. So I got my boat shipped to Vancouver for nothing because Corel gave Luke a bunch of cradles in return for letting me put my Osprey in a shipment full of Pueos. And now Ron owns that boat.
Yeah, actually, that actually links into a question that Don had in the chat. What did you think the disadvantages of a banana ama are? Because like the Osprey has banana ama, and I know that like when I'm going against waves, it bounces a lot, which is a bit unnerving.
To my understanding, there are some people that still really like the banana ama, and it's not a problem. Downwind, primarily though.
Yeah, so, yeah, okay. Yeah, because I know like the flatter amas like the Pueo and whatnot will cut into a wave and are really quite stable, whereas the banana ama jumps over top of a wave if you're going against the wind, and it's a kind of unnerving. I did mention, and I mentioned. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Whoever was speaking, I'm going to shut up.
No. Okay. Yeah, and like I mentioned as well that with the Osprey, because it's got a lot of volume in front, small person's boat, and I'm on the heavier side of it. I put ankle weights on the front bungees to keep the nose down, and I think it actually, when going against the waves as well, it's stabilizing the nose, so the nose isn't bouncing up, you know, on the waves, and likewise, I guess the ama isn't bouncing up as much as it used to either. So,
see, that's something you learn through time, which is what you have to do. You have to embrace your boat. You have to learn to paddle your boat, and you know that'll happen. I mean, some say that I didn't give some boats enough time to get better. There are maybe some. There may be some truth in that in a couple of cases, not many, because I had other criteria that I used when I decided this boat isn't for me. But you know, for most people, I also had kind of the luxury of being able to own more than one boat at a time, and that was so really what I was able to do was to kind of flow boats through. I kept the one that I liked the best, that I was racing all the time, but it really was Jan's boat, really, at the end of the day, because as I mentioned earlier, Jan really didn't care much about the boat itself, other than it was comfortable and easy to rig, and so it didn't matter if I bought a new boat that I wanted to try out. That became her. I love the Aries, but it's really her boat, right? Fortunately, I'm allowed to paddle it when I want to, or at least race it when I want to, if she's not using it. But
Bob, I think that Jan's notion of comfort factor is a really important criteria. It's incredibly important. And if you think of boats as musical instruments like guitars, anyone can play any guitar if you know how to play a guitar. But they're all different. As you've said through most of this presentation, they all have subtle or dramatic differences. But I think the comfort factor is really important. And then people make decisions based on color, for example, as you did once. You admit that you made a decision on color. But the other, like the boat that is under 20 feet, there are practical considerations too. Like a boat that's under 20 feet fit into the standard modern garage, and boats that are over 20 feet don't. So, you know, that's a really important thing that might be really important to somebody who has a townhouse with a garage. An under 20-foot boat will fit in that garage, and they can also fit in shipping containers in a way that over 20-foot boats don't. But I think I really like your notion that Jan places comfort above everything, because I think that may stand the test of time better than other criteria.
So when you're comparing different boats and you sit down in each type of boat, do you get as, you know, particular as measuring out what the distance is between the footwell and the seat, or, you know, for each type of boat to see like how that boat differs for where the way that you set it up for you personally?
I have a sort of a seating criteria that I use. I like to be a little bit more forward. I like, for instance, Jen and I are about the same height, albeit her legs are longer than mine. But she likes to have the seat at the back. So if I'm getting into Jan's boat, I have to move the seat forward quite a bit. But so I like to be a little bit more forward, and I don't know why or anything, why I developed that, but that's the way I like to have my knees a little bit, greater angle. Here's a little bit of information I got from Johnny. So Danny Ching does virtually all. He's Johnny's main go-to guy when it comes to testing boats, and he puts the boats through all the new boats through amazing paces and into every condition imaginable, side chop, headwind, downwind, everything, and he times everything very, very professionally and feeds it back to Johnny. So the guy, and one of the guys that is also a team rider for Puakea is Kai Chong, who lives on Oahu. And they're about the same size, exactly, according to Johnny. They're exactly the same size. And Kai is now winning races on Oahu on the Valari, where he hadn't been. He's always been an amazing paddler, and he's always been in the top number, but he hasn't won races for a while, but he's winning races now on the Valari. He sits, and remember, he and Danny are exactly the same height. He sits 3 inches further back than Danny does. Danny likes to sit further forward than Kai does, and that's I think, and I think Danny likes, and maybe me to some extent. I like to be a little further forward, especially on big water, because I think the boat will push over the wave a little bit easier. They're also light and responsive now that they all do that pretty well, but I think that's why Danny feels that he can get the boat up onto the wave or over the wave a little bit better by sitting a bit more forward. But I do, yeah, I have a position. Don't forget, everybody wants to be the carrying load of the boat. The design of the boat is set up so that you can have the main weight right over the fulcrum in the middle, right? So you try to keep, but some people like to be a little bit further back and some a little bit further forward. As far as I'm concerned, and some people like to have their legs fully extended. That's another comfort issue, but I'm not sure how effective it would be if you were racing.
There's been some discussion, I know, about weight, and there's a sort of casual discussion about different boats belonging to different weight classes. And I know that before this meeting started, the board and you, Bob, had a discussion about how strict that weight bias for different boats is. And I'm wondering if you could maybe chat about your feelings about, is somebody too heavy for a boat or not, and how, whether that's sort of written on the spec sheet or whether that's based on how you feel.
Forever, there's been guidelines established for boats from the Hurricanes up to the current boats. There's been guidelines for weight, and they've been designed for, I think heavier people can make do with boats that are designed for smaller people. I think it might be a different story for a small person to try to make a bigger boat, a bigger volume boat work well. I used a couple of examples that I won't repeat to the world here, but there are some big people paddling smaller boats and loving them. But those people typically are extremely dedicated paddlers and on the water constantly, and they have learned how to paddle them, and they prefer the paddle. The big guys prefer to paddle the boats in big water, right? On smaller boats. Well, everybody prefers to paddle, a boat in big water or downwinds. But these guys who were way outside the recommended weight categories have not had problems. I think they're built strong enough these days anyway that they will carry heavier weights than the guidelines are. But I would have to ask this question of, maybe Leanne has an answer, but I would have to ask this question directly. Would you agree with me if I say that the boat categories are better suited for small people not to have bigger boats than they can perform well on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. It's harder for a smaller person to get a large volume boat to move than it is for a big person to get a smaller volume boat to move. As a big person in a smaller volume boat, we can figure out that boat in terms of where's its sweet spot, in terms of where it likes power to stroke, and we can make it move. That's me in the Kahele the past 2 years, being 220 pounds in a boat that's best for someone under 160 kind of thing, but we can still make it boogie. But if you put like 130 pound, if we put Dawn in a kai, she'd be swimming. Like it's just too much boat to be able to move. I had to put one in there, Dawn. I couldn't get away without one short joke.
Come on, come on.
Hey,
anyway,
great things come in small packages, right, Dawn?
Yeah, you got it. You got it, Bob. You got it.
Oh boy. There's another issue, not issue, but something that maybe also, Leanne, have you heard anything about the oh heck, what do they call those things that are the boats that the paddle boarders are now up on the fin under the water? What do you call that?
The foils?
Foils. I had a brain cramp there. I couldn't think of the word. So they're talking about foils now to some degree. And I don't know, and somebody said AMAs. So I'm not sure how that would work, but there's discussions on it, on the subject. And the only thing I was giving it a little bit of thought was maybe maybe you can get the AMA out of the water and the foil that's in the water is less resistant, and therefore you're going to get a little bit more boat speed. I don't know how that would work at all.
Yeah, I've heard rumors of playing with the foils on the AMA, and whoever user is just said that in the chat as well.
Whoever what?
There's someone named User that just said small foil on the AMA, and I've heard rumors of that too, but I can't state where or when.
Oh, okay. So I'd like to know what the concept is. I saw a comment by Steve Blythe, who's coming out with he's the Waveblade guy that is coming out with a new OC1, or has already come out with an OC1, and somebody asked him about the foil, and his response on this chat that I was reading was that there's got to be some reason why nobody's done it yet, but maybe it's a matter of time.
So, Bob, I'm going to ask a zinger question. It was further up in the list, but it speaks to a whole range of issues. The question is, what is your favorite boat of all time? Good luck answering that.
You know what? I love my Aries, and I love my Ehukai, and I love my Hurricane, and I love my Poyo. Those boats, you would never make a mistake by choosing any of those boats. But I was thinking of the famous Nappy Napoleon line when it was asked about what the best boat was. He said the free boat. Well, I haven't had the luxury of a free boat yet, but maybe someday. But no, frankly, I do have my preferences for conditions, and I do have, again, the luxury of having a choice. I only have 2 boats that I choose from, well, actually 3 if you count my Hurricane. People still keep their Hurricanes, and I'm told anyway, because they are so good for time trialing in flat conditions. And they keep Hurricanes if for no other reason to do time trials, but well, with the exception of Falls Creek, I'm not, well, maybe Kelowna does. It's been so long since I've done a club time trial that I can't remember the last time, but so the Hurricane has that benefit, I think. But as I think I said earlier, I love my Ehukai for upwind and flatter conditions, and I love my Aries for downwind. And I do have the ability to choose either, you know, whatever the conditions allow. But I don't want to detract from the idea that you have to learn to paddle. Most people only have 1 boat, so embrace it, learn to paddle it, and you will get faster on it if you put the effort in. I mean, geez, there was a time when guys would say, how come you're so fast? You're so old. So, well, if you put as much time into it as I do, you'd be faster than you are. And these people did. And so now they're kicking my butt. So I'm playing the age card a lot more often than I used to.
But Bob, you're right on the money in terms of it. Like the boats on the market these days, all the new ones that are out there they're all great boats. And it's just, you can't go wrong with any of them. It's all about, and we'll go back to what Jan said, it's all about comfort. What does your butt feel best in? What does your body feel best in? That kind of thing. Because like when I travel, like I've been in your Scorpius XM when I've been in Maui. I've been in a Puyo X when I've been in San Diego. I've been in Puyo Gen 1s when I travel other places. Like because I travel, you get what you get. So you've got it. It's really all about the paddler and finding out how you can get comfortable. And if you're stuck with the boat, get comfortable in it. But if you have a choice of a boat, what works for you? What feels like home to your ass in that boat, ultimately? And for some people that are talking about some of the bigger volume boats and small people, they're right. It's like that if that rudder's not going to reach the water, if you're a tiny person in a big boat. So you're going to lose a lot of control, especially when you get to places like the Gorge or Lake Ontario or here in Kelowna where the waters can get up a little bit bigger. So yeah, ultimately it comes down to comfort. Whatever boat you choose, technique will overcome a lot of boat differences. And unless you're going for a huge prize money that really doesn't exist in Outrigger, do what makes you happy. Pick your color. If that's what it comes down to between an Aries and a Kahele, pick the color you like. Like you're gonna love the boat that you have when you learn it. Yeah.
There's some, I don't know how much of a factor this is, but some of the boats will be discontinued eventually. I wouldn't be surprised to see even the Aokai. I don't know. Possibly the Kahikai, I'm not sure. Kai has discontinued his Scorpius pretty much, as far as I know, even on, because he has a satellite builder on Oahu, who builds the Antares and the Aries there. But some of these boats will get retired over time. The one that seems to be really surviving the test of time is the Hurricane. And there are people like JD told me the other day on the phone that a guy, he didn't have a Hurricane. And he won't stock Hurricanes. He will order them in if somebody wants them, but he won't put one in stock to, on spec. So this guy couldn't supply him a Hurricane, but he found a dealer in the Midwest that had one. This guy drove all the way to the Midwest to buy the canoe and drive it back. So that one sort of stood the test of time, but some of the other models, of course, I don't know if you think about resale value. But if you have a boat that's 2 or 3 generations old, it's maybe going to lose a little bit of resale value. But I suppose they all reach a point where they're worth what they're worth. They're not, the age of it no longer matters a whole lot. But everybody wants to get a newer model, and I've got some interest in looking at that Volare as well and seeing how that works. I got to find a way to catch you again, but I don't think I ever will. So.
Leanne, I think this might be an opportunity. We've mentioned the big builders right now, the ones that have sort of saturated the market, and certainly some of their generational stuff may be phased out, as we've just discussed. But this is an opportunity to talk about to the audience about the fact that there's new boats coming in right now from other parts of the world that could be considered. And Leanne, I'm wondering if you can speak to some of the new stuff that may be hitting the market this year and next year.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like Bob talked about stuff that's no longer being produced. And I've got a spreadsheet here on this other screen where it's like, I've got all the builders listed and all the boats. And we've got a beautiful situation here where we're getting a few more players into the OC1 game that didn't make OC1s before. So we've got a company out of Italy called Allwave that make OC1s, V1s, OC2s. They're most often seen in Europe, but we also see them on the world scale for para-canoe. And so Coast Outdoors of North Vancouver is bringing them in. I believe there's a company in Eastern Canada that is as
H2O.
H2O is bringing them in.
Yeah.
Nice. So there's two OC1 models, the V1 and an OC2 that Coast Outdoors is bringing in. I don't know what H2O, if they're bringing in all the models or not, but that's just one example of it. They're going to be a little bit, they're not going to be the pre-preg carbon like we're getting from the ozone boats. They're going to be able to take a little bit more dings, that kind of thing. But they're a sturdy boat. They've lasted this test of time. They're going to be great for a lot of paddlers getting into small boats kind of thing. So Coast Outdoors has stuff coming in this summer in May, I believe. Another one that's new on the market is Carbonology. So Carbonology is a company out of South Africa, and they tend to make surf skis, but they have gotten into the OC1 game, and they were just recently had their Swift OC1 down at NAC down in California. And Wade made sure to text me this a few seconds ago, but I've already talked to all their reps, and this is going to be like, they're set up to be a great club boat. They're going to be fiberglass vacuum and carbon honeycomb. So they've got two different layups, but the price point is, so they're going to be a little bit heavier, but the price point is going to be more in the club layup, like a club affordable range in terms of 2,500 US and 3,900 US. Bakayako has adjustments. They look, you can tell that they're a surf ski designer, the way the hull goes, but if you go on to Facebook, to the Carbonology Facebook page, there's pictures up there. The spreadsheet that we're going to put up with this recording, when we put it up on the website, will have links to their website, as well as who's going to bring them in. So Ocean Paddle Sports out of California is going to be the dealer for those. And so it would be a matter of getting them up from California. So of course there'd be a shipping cost on that, but it's a nice option because we have been pretty limited in terms of kind of those more entry-level boats for small boats and club options. So it's going to be nice to have that option on the market. And then Nello, yes, and when the border opens, you're right, Susan. And Nello, who is a very popular sprint canoe and kayak company, they're into the OC1 game as well. And their OC1 is called the Evolution OC1. I know of one person in Toronto that has it so far. So far, he's quite happy with the boat. Hasn't really had it out in waves yet, so I don't have many anecdotal feedback about it. But again, it's on the Nello website. I don't know who's dealing them or bringing them in. I'm assuming it's going to be whatever the Canadian dealers are for Nello, period. And I know that at one point, oh, Derek, you might have to help me on this. What's the other, not Nello, but what's the other brand that was playing with OC1 or V1s? It's another sprint company. Come on, Derek. Who else makes them? What's the other boat besides Nello? In spring pack. Plastex. Thank you. Plastex. I know they were playing with a V1 at one point as well. I don't know if they're playing with an OC1, but I just know that from working with the para-canoe athletes over the years. So, and it sounds like there's a few more in the East that are coming in with the Nello. So hopefully I'll get some more information on that to pass those along. But those are kind of the three bigger players or players coming into the market that are giving more options. Huki, unfortunately, is not in production at the moment. He had to shut down due to COVID. He just couldn't afford to keep people working because they weren't allowed to work. And a lot of his workers went and got other jobs. So he's in a place where he has to train new people. So they're going to be up and running hopefully in a few months. But at the moment, Huki's not making boats and they don't have any in stock. There's the ARE. These are boats they call it, say, ARE Tahiti, but they're actually made in Thailand. So don't let that fool you. They make a V1. Which I know Derek in Ontario has. This is the V1 that Kenang has been bringing in or working on bringing in. They also have a new OC1 that again debuted down at NAC in California recently called the Mana. I have no information about it. It's still relatively new. I know there's some people down at NAC that test drove it, but again, that's another one that would be coming in through California, or I don't know if Kenang has more information on that one or not. And as far as OC1 goes, those are all the ones that I have on my list. Bob, you talked about Steve Blythe coming up with a new OC1 as well.
Steve Blythe was one of the pioneers I mentioned earlier, and he's got, if you look on Facebook, you can actually get to his page, and you can scroll down and see a picture. It looks wonderful, and he knows that he knows what he's doing. He's done it for so long, but he now has, I don't know what to call it, whether it's a Vantage still, because it was called the Vantage, I think, and as opposed to his two-man was a wave blade. But the Vantage now, his first one, at least, there's one on Oahu that he sent over to a company called Aloha Composites. It's, I think his name is Kalani Irvine. He's a noteworthy Hawaiian paddler, and he's testing it there. So, yeah, I don't know what his manufacturing capacity is. Frankly, it might be almost impossible to get one for some time to come, but it's going to be a good one when it gets out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, a lot of these newer ones coming in, it's like we're going to get some introductions and see some around this year maybe. Sounds like some Falls Creek people have a Mana coming in, some Nellos are coming in. So it'll be interesting to see these boats and all waves coming in as well, so that people for thinking of 2022 can get in those orders over the winter if they're looking at those, but hopefully be able to demo some over this year if there's enough around for people around. So the game is opening up. You're not going to be stuck with Ozone as your only option, or Kamanu as your only option. But as companies are, being able to get their workers back in, because as COVID starts to resolve, hopefully there won't be as long as waiting times as there are for boats right now. Because last year and this year, it's been hard to find boats for people that want boats, and there may be some used ones coming on the market as people upgrade, hopefully, so that newer paddlers can get into it. But a lot of it's going to be wait and see. But I've got all the websites here and contacts listed. So if you want to do your own research, this list will be posted up with the recording when we put it up. And if you have more information on any of these boats than we've kind of talked about today in terms of contacts or boats that we didn't talk about, please let us know so that we can add it. We don't want to show favoritism to any company or brand or anything. We want people to know that there's lots of options out there. And hopefully with more options, we can find something for everybody's price point that they need.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. Just before we hand it over to Ron, just for a wrap up, I urge clubs. You took today's audience took in a lot of information, and Bob has like this wealth of detail on different boats. It can be a little overwhelming. So what I would encourage you to do is go to your clubs, and you can also go to CORA's board of directors in different regions and empower yourselves to say, we want a boat day. You can go to your club and say, we want you to work with a local distributor or a local provisioner of boats and set up a boat day for us so that we can go out and try these different boats. And I can tell you without hesitation that any distributor will gladly set that up. They'll work hard to make that happen for you. And you don't be shy, in other words. So as Leanne said, we're going to provide lots of resources after this along with the recording. So that you can sort of do a little research on your own, but do approach your clubs and certainly approach your regional rep at the CORA board level to help you sort of advocate for a sort of boat trial day, because as Bob has said, and Jen behind the scenes has said, what works best might be what's most comfortable, and you don't know that until you try it out. So Ron, we're at 5:27. I'm going to hand it over to you, and thanks everyone so far today.
Can I ask a quick question, or not a quick question, but make a quick statement? I totally overlooked mentioning Western Canoe and Kayak and the importance of the sea lions in the early going. And as far as I know, they still build them. Sam, I think, do you own the mold, Sam? I think Sam owns the mold, yeah. Sam doesn't always on mute. but so so the sea lion, of course, was a design from D. Van Winkle from California. It was called the sea lion, but it was spelled differently. It was actually the word sea, and then when Ross and Mel bought the mold and brought it up, it became the C for Canada, I guess. And they were instrumental. They were huge, and they were locally built, and clubs had them because they could get them, and they were, you know, relatively inexpensive. Anyway, sorry, that was I wanted to get that word in. So.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Sam, did you have anything to add with the sea lions? You're on mute right now.
No, my sea lion right now is a club in Leduc want to buy the mold from me, but because of COVID, I can't transport to them.
Yeah, okay, so
right now,
so you're looking to get out of the sea lion.
Yes, well, Ron was not building them very fast for me. I think only 2 boats were made. One we have in Falls Creek, and the other one Gary Cohen's got. They're a good boat. They're a good standard boat. I can build either cockpit style or sit upon. I've got both molds. Just looking for a good builder, somebody can put it together.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sam. Thanks again, Bob. So I think we're at the end of our time. That wraps it up for today. Going forward, we've got more video conference series sessions. Coaching session will be April the 10th, and another town hall on April the 24th. And that town hall session, I think we've got repair and maintenance of OC1s on deck for that one. So that'll be an interesting topic for everybody. And also at the last CORA board meeting, we authorized another small boat virtual racing series for the spring. So that means come mid-April, May, and June, we'll have registration up and running for small boat virtual races with additional host clubs. So for the winter series, we had 7 or 8 clubs, and then for the spring series we'll have different clubs, so that that'll serve as fundraising for those other clubs moving forward. So again, I'd like to thank the board members for moderating, and Bob for taking the time to join us and give us all that background. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Watch the website for the upload and the recording, and have a great weekend, everybody. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Bye.